There we go. Welcome to Inside the Realtor Studio, interviews with industry leaders and professionals in real estate.
Oh,
The Tucson Association of Realtors turns 100 this year, 1921 to 2021. Let's learn a bit of history by talking to the experts themselves. Today, we have the distinct honor of interviewing a Realtor member who was born the same year as the inception of the association. But in all honesty, the association is older by a couple of weeks.
oh.
Margaret has had a storied career in Tucson real estate, achieving her real estate license in the late 70s. Margaret shared her expertise with just 4 local brokerages. She's traveled to many national and state conventions, served as Tucson president of the Women's Council of Realtors, as well as WCR governor. And she was awarded Realtor of the Year in 1994. It is my pleasure to welcome Margaret Glover to Inside the Realtor Studio. Welcome, Margaret, and happy birthday.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
It's nice to be here.
Oh, we're so happy you are. Let's begin our voyage with a bit before you were in real estate. So where were you born?
I was born in Butler, Missouri.
All right. And what brought you to Tucson?
Retirement.
Oh,
My husband was Air Force, and we had spent many years in many countries. And he said, let's go where it's warm and where I can play golf.
perfect.
And too.
Yeah. So before you got into real estate as a career, what were you doing before that?
I had worked for the government through an Air Force group in Kansas City, Missouri. And I also had done a lot of volunteer work. And each place that I would be living, I always liked to learn about the people, the food, and the location.
Wow. How many different places did you relocate to while your husband was active in his career?
Well, we lived in 8 different countries.
Wow.
I ate a lot of food. And I loved every one of them. It was an education in itself. My husband was very busy. He was a fighter pilot. He was even shot down one time.
Oh, wow.
Before I knew him. And I was happy that everything worked well. Our family was all born in a military hospital. And I'm a true Air Force wife, retired.
So 8 different countries. Did you have a favorite?
Well, I shouldn't say that because I love them all.
Okay.
She does.
Each one of them had their own standout personality.
Okay.
And I loved it. I loved the food. I even took a cooking course in Paris. It has
nice.
a fancy name and it has a fancy food. But I went in each week for a year and worked on developing something that was going to just be out of this world.
Wow. What a great adventure.
It was.
So what made you decide to try real estate then when you came to Tucson?
Well, I had been working with a lot of people during the Air Force years. And I always wanted to meet the people of the area. And I still couldn't think about retirement, really. It happened, and we talked about it, and it was right after the holidays. And I hadn't made any plans. I thought it will come naturally. So I ran in to an old friend the first weekend we were here. We were living at the base over the weekend, the family, and going to start within a few days of looking for a home for ourselves. And the very next day, I had crossed over to the officers club for breakfast. And I ran into an old friend, and she said, "What kind of volunteer work are you going to be doing?" I said, "Kitty," it was Kitty. Her husband at that time was stationed here. And I said, "I just arrived yesterday. I really haven't had time to think about it." But she said, "I'll pick you up in the morning. I'm going over to the hospital. You might find something over there you can do." I said, "All right, I'll be ready." So I went over and I volunteered for a small job over there. I'm not a nurse. I'm not good in any medical world, but I worked over at the hospital for a short while and volunteering. And one day I said to my husband, I think I'll stop volunteering after 20 some years, almost 30 years.
Wow.
And he said, "Well, why are you doing that?" I said, "Well, most people make some money when they work." I said, "Why don't I find something to do that will pay me a little pittance?" And so he said, "Well, what are you going to do?" I said, "I don't know." And he said, "Well, you've always liked houses." And he said, "Would you like to do what our good neighbor across the street from us did? She went into real estate." And I said, "Well, maybe I will." Well, it so happened that the person that was showing us housing had been in the Air Force,
Okay.
and he understood what the predicament I was going through. And anyway, I said, "That's what I'll do." I called him and I said, "What school did you go to?" He told me. I went to the school the next day. And that's how it all started. It sounds like a real fairy tale.
Back in
Now-
1978.
Pardon me?
Back in 1978.
Right, 1978.
And which school was that you went to?
Well, it was one that had a man's name.
Ford.
What was that?
Brodsky?
Brodsky.
Brodsky?
No, that wasn't it. He and
Oh.
his wife had.
Hogan?
Hogan.
Hogan.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Now,
Yeah.
he'll never forgive me for forgetting his name.
It's been a
Now,
while.
you put me in a predicament already.
He's still in business.
I went to Hogan, yes,
Um,
and his wife was in the shop at the same time too.
mhm. Yep.
And I finished a class. I had no idea what to do from then on, but I met my partner in the next seat, and she said was very helpful and realized that I had no knowledge of what I was doing. And she said to me, "Where have you been interviewed?" Or I said, "Interviewed? And I haven't even finished the class." She said, "I'm going over tomorrow and be interviewed." And there was a young man that was sitting next to me, and he said, could I go along with? And I said, sure, come on. So we all three went over, and I was interviewed by my first realtor
Mhm.
and that owned the business. And that's when I started in real estate.
How
That-
exciting.
That was Ed Smith.
That was Ed Smith.
Oh, okay.
Yes, you'll remember him.
So now you only worked at a total of what, 4 brokerages?
Mhm.
Judy's, I assume, was the last.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
The current, the
Judy
current.
and I met through Women's Council.
Uh-huh.
We traveled to a meeting in Phoenix. And I told her at a little bit later on after we had met that way. And I said, I will never come to your office, Judy, because we're turning into 2 good friends. And I don't want anything to happen to our friendship. And I didn't go there until my last
Yeah.
my last office. So we're still friends.
There we go. That's all that counts.
Here's
Yeah.
my other good friend.
So
who
Margaret, when
has
you
helped me out.
when you started in 1978, can you describe the technology of the day?
The technology of the day.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't much.
Well,
Was it a telephone and that was it, or?
they always laughed that you could,
It was
write a contract on the trunk of a car.
and it was
That's
a
what they
one-page,
told me.
Margaret. One page. One page.
What do you think?
And it was a 1-page contract?
Yes.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
wow. Those were the days.
That's right.
Yeah.
I learned a lot as I went along because I wanted to be as good a person and as good a realtor combined.
And how did you get involved then with the Women's Council of Realtors?
I've always been a joiner. I had been in scouting only if I didn't have to spend the night overnight.
No
So
tent.
I had
She
been
draws the
neighborhood,
line.
I had been neighborhood chairman on several bases during my career, and so I kept up with that a little bit.
Yeah. So with Women's Council and that, did somebody invite you or did you get a push to go in there, or how did that all come about?
Oh, yes. The lady who had been so kind to me that was sitting next to me in the class said, my cousin is a governor of Women's Council. And she said, we should join that. And I said, oh, well, all right. You know, I've worked in Officers' Wives Club, so I'll enjoy that.
Yeah.
And that's how I got into Women's Council.
And,
people were
and
very
apparently you did
welcoming.
enjoy it.
They were welcoming, and they had a purpose and a goal. And I liked it very much. And later on, I ran into some old friends. So that helped. I
And
ran
there's-
into 2 ladies that I had known when we were stationed in England.
Oh, wow.
In
Yeah.
Women's Council, and they were both, national presidents later on.
My goodness. Yeah.
So that was fun. One of them had been a neighbor and real close, 2 or 3 doors down. So
Wow.
that was fun, and we ran in to each other at a Women's Council luncheon.
That's right.
And we went home and told our husbands, and lo and behold, they came to a Women's Council. They course, they didn't talk women's council. They just talked about those birds they had been flying together.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
They had flown some missions together. So they talked old times and had a wonderful visit.
Well, now you also were involved at the association in different volunteering, weren't you? And being on committees and things like that.
Yes, I was very fortunate. I did some local, and I also chaired national bylaws.
Oh, wow.
Excuse me.
Mhm.
Excuse me. And I'm talking too much. My throat's dry.
Okay.
And so I thought that I would try different things. Now, what was your question that you just asked me that I?
Well, you had gotten involved with the association
Oh,
both
yes.
locally and you were telling us about being part of national bylaws and that.
Yes,
Um,
and that by being on that committee,
mhm.
it put automatically introduced me to others. And I did serve on a couple of others in a small way, not as a chair,
Yeah,
just as a member of national.
yeah.
And I always enjoyed it very much. I felt like that they were wonderful people that we were connected with. And I also learned a lot because at one time I served on a committee with one of the national presidents, and we went for several weeks to work on a project for learning about it and seeing if it was going to be something that we wanted and needed here in our state.
Oh, okay.
So it was a learning experience all the time. And I was not good in languages. And and when we lived in France, I took conversational French all the time. So I could be around a little bit. And along my family all learned it. And my one child was in nursery school at the time, and he wouldn't even talk to me when he got home from nursery because my accent was so bad.
Oh,
I know that because he had a perfect accent.
well, I think, Margaret, I got to know you because of seeing you and Judy, a couple of fixtures at at NAR conventions. You guys would travel. So when did you start going to conventions and that?
We did.
Yeah.
And when Judy was president, we roomed together so she wouldn't be alone. And I was tickled to death to do that because that made me have a nicer room.
Sure. Yeah, there's that.
Would you say, Margaret, it was in the 1980s when you started traveling to the different
Was it?
conventions? Mhm.
Yeah.
She's
Good.
been doing that a long time.
Oh, I say.
That's right.
A lot of
Yeah.
work, a lot of fun.
Yes,
Well, and you
Yeah.
get to meet so many people.
many things happened. And
Yeah.
I'm saddened now to hear of the prince leaving England. And when we first were stationed in England, he and the Queen had first been married. They were both young, attractive,
Sure. Yeah.
beautiful couple. And that after being there, living in England 4 years, I loved that duty. And it was so tense when I heard that he was not well.
Yeah.
because they were a beautiful young couple at that time. And we all got older. I lost my husband after we retired here. And that was a reason why I stayed on, because he is now at the National Cemetery in Cave Creek.
Okay.
But Margaret, one of your probably most memorable things when you were in England, do you want to tell a little bit about that?
Oh, yes. The general and his wife on the base where we were at that time. My husband commanded a base in England for 4 years, and the general of that Air Force there, 3rd Air Force, and us, we were invited to tea with the Queen. And that was a huge affair. And of course, it was a panic to know what exactly to wear. I went first to find out what color I should or should not wear. So that was a wonderful experience.
Oh, I imagine.
And I saw so many celebrities there, and it was in a garden. And at Sandringham was close to where we were stationed, but this was in London, so this is different.
Oh. So, talking about real estate, let's, I wondered if you had a favorite moment during your career as a realtor that you would look onto and you go, boy, that was great. I was so glad I did that, or.
Oh, I had a lot of favorite moments because I met so many wonderful people, and it was a joy. And when I received my award from National at the end of my term,
Mhm.
which is, I understand my,
Your 40-year emeritus, is that the one you're referring to?
yes,
Mhm.
that I'm thinking of 40 years in real estate.
Yeah.
It was wonderful. It was sad in a way. It was kind of two-sided, but it had been a wonderful learning experience in my life. And I can't say enough about the acquaintances that I've made
Yeah.
and the friends that grew out of that. So when you're being helped and you're being introduced to a lot of people, you take on certain feelings about people. And I grew up as an only child.
Hmm.
I lost my parents in their 50s, unfortunately.
Oh.
And so I guess that's one reason I've always been a people person.
You are a people person. In fact, when you said, something about liking the houses, I said, well, I think it's more about the people. Let me ask Judy and Joanne, are there any memories that you guys have talked about or discussed that you wanted to bring up during this, memories about Margaret that you'd like to share?
That we can say publicly?
Well,
Now watch this.
yeah, behave.
I'm already in
I know,
trouble.
Steve, we had another party that was with us too. There were 4 of us. And it was Mildred.
Mildred
And
West from
Yes.
Green Valley.
Yeah.
From Green Valley, yes, yes.
And Mildred and Margaret, when we would go to the conventions and everything, they'd say they were tired and they were going back to the room. And Joanne and I would go out partying and we'd come back and they were in the bar drinking.
Yeah.
And we
Whoa.
cracked up about that. We never forgot that. It was just hysterical. So that was part of it. Everybody had such a good time. And we always looked forward to the national meetings and meeting everybody.
Yeah.
So we had a good time.
Yeah.
Joanne's the youngest and took care of us.
That's not saying a lot these days, but but there were Mildred, Judy, Margaret, myself. We would room together. When it was just like a big slumber party. We all got along so well. We traveled throughout the country together and
Right.
just representing, for the most part, Women's Council. The four of us went through all of our local chairs, our state chairs, national offices. So many committees. So it was a lot of
Right.
work, but it was a lot of fun time. We always brought some fun in with that, the working business meetings. But many dear friendships were made through the course of that travel.
Yeah,
I
they
know
were.
Judy always has to have some fun with it.
I know, I do. I love it. So I love it.
Well, believe it or not, we're about at the end of our interview here, and I just wanted to see if you had any last thoughts you'd like to add in, Margaret, about your
Well,
career and,
Yes, I just thought of something.
okay,
One of the reasons that I got into Women's Council so early is that there was an election coming up. And I had only been a member for a short while, but I had a telephone call and this lady asked me if I would run as a member of the board. And I said, I'm too new, honey. I just got here. And she said, well, the person who was running for this office, her husband is being transferred. They're moving their
no.
business from Tucson. And we know that you were active in Officers' Wives Club for a long time and working with American women in Europe. And we thought that you might venture out. And I said, well, if you think it's safe for me to come along, I will, because I'll be the one who's gaining. And I appreciate so much being asked. And that's how I got into Women's Council
Yeah,
at the time that I had first arrived.
so you got an ask and you got a little push at the same time.
I sure did.
You got voluntold.
Correct.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you bet. Well, now here's how we end our
Okay.
Here's how we end our interview. I'm going to do 7 quick questions and I'm looking for 7 quick answers.
Oh,
The first one is, what's your favorite word?
my favorite word,
Mhm.
love.
Oh, nice. And what's your least favorite word?
Oh, hurry,
Hurry.
hurry up.
And what turns you on?
Sports.
U of A.
Good thoughts,
Good thoughts.
good
Okay.
thoughts.
And what turns you off?
My what?
What turns you off?
What turns me off? Disgust.
And what profession other than real estate would you have liked to have tried?
I once wanted to be a nurse when I was growing up, but I was always interested in law. And that's why I worked in the legal world, and
Mhm.
why I enjoyed working for the government.
See, that makes sense. Yeah. Is there a profession you're really glad you didn't try?
That I what?
That you didn't try.
That
Is
I
there
did
one?
try?
Yeah. Is there one you're glad you didn't try to do?
No,
No.
I felt like that I should try to develop what I had chosen.
Okay. And in closing, if you could do a shout out to anyone living or not in the real estate community, who would it be and why?
Oh, the next new realtor.
The next new realtor. That's good.
That's really good. That's a first. And I think you've been full of firsts, Margaret Glover.
Yeah.
And I thank you so much for agreeing to the interview today. Did you have any last thoughts?
I was frightened.
It
I
goes
have
by
all
pretty
this
quick.
knowledge around me here,
Mhm.
and I never know what they might say or do.
True. Yeah.
They're my good friends, and now I like you.
Oh, thank you.
Good.
All right. Well, with any last thoughts, Judy or Joanne?
No, it's been wonderful knowing Margaret. We've had such a great time traveling and we've just had a blast,
Right.
really.
We did.
Great.
We
So
did.
we all get along and we just loved it. So we loved what we were doing.
And it shows.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you so much.